I will tell you the worst thing I ever did as a king. Not the battles I lost, or the treaties I signed too slowly, or the years I spent building walls around Ashenmore Hold that kept enemies out in warmth in equal measure. None of those. The worst thing I ever did was stand in my own great hall, on a night when the candles burned low and the council sat smug and satisfied around the long table, and watch a woman turn her back and walk out of my life. I did not call after her. I did not move. I stood there with my wolf screaming inside my ribs like something had caught fire, and I held it down, held it in, told myself it was politics, told myself it was the right choice, told myself she would understand. She did not look back. Sara never looked back, not once, not at the doors, not at the threshold. She walked out of my hall in her worn amber dress, the one that was always too bright for my council's taste, too vivid to her, and she disappeared into the dark of the corridor, and I let her go. That was 43 days ago. I have not slept in 3. Let me give you the shape of it, because a king who confesses must confess cleanly. Sara of the Thornville line had come to Ashenmore Hold 6 months before as part of a trade agreement between our packs, not as a guest, not as a dignitary, but as a healer's assistant to old Marin, who had served my grandfather. She arrived with 2 bags and a birdcage she carried herself. An empty cage, she said. A habit. And within a week she had turned my kitchen's entire supply of dried herbs on its head, reorganized the healing stores in a way that made Marin weep with gratitude, and laughed so loudly at something my youngest guard said in the courtyard that every head in the hold turned. My council called it disruptive. Bright, one of them said, the way they meant it as an insult. Too bright, too vivid. The sort of woman who took up space that wasn't offered, who spoke when spoken to and also when not, who carried color into a gray place and did not think to dim it. I watched her from across the hall at dinner that first week, and my wolf went not still. That is not the right word, and I made a vow to myself to tell this correctly. My wolf did not go still. It went alert, the way a creature goes alert when it has been waiting a long time, and the thing it was waiting for has finally arrived and it cannot quite believe it, and so it holds itself in perfect motionless readiness, because to move would be to risk this being a dream. I had felt nothing like it in 34 years of my life. I told myself it was curiosity. For 2 months I told myself that. She ate with the healers and the lower staff and seemed to prefer it. She brought scraps from the kitchen to the pack wolves on cold mornings, and the old ones let her scratch behind their ears, which they had not let my senior hunters do in years. She grew things in a clay pot on the eastern windowsill of the healing quarters, something bright-flowered, vivid orange, impractical in a northern hold. And when the cook said it was an eyesore, she moved it to the window that faced the moor and watered it every morning at the same hour regardless of weather. She was the most fully herself person I had ever encountered. And my council had decided, 3 months into her stay, that I needed a Luna. Not Sara. They were specific on that point. The Thornville bloodline was old but attenuated. Only a few families left, scattered, the gift diluted by generations of isolation, their status in the pack world long since faded. Sara herself was unbonded, yes, but she was a healer's assistant, not a ranking Omega, not a political match. She brought nothing to the table, as Aldrich, my senior councilman, put it, nothing of strategic value. What they wanted was a match with the Kareth pack, whose territory bordered ours to the south. Lysa of Kareth, composed, appropriate, the right bloodline for the right alliance. I said yes. I told myself it was for the pack. I believed it, the way you believe the things you tell yourself when the truth is too bright to look at directly. The night I announced it, Sara was in the hall. She always came to the public announcements because she kept the record of pack health, tracking any illness or injury among the gathered wolves so she could alert Marin. She sat in the lower section, her ledger open on her knee, and I made myself not look at her when I spoke. But I heard her. Not her voice. She made no sound. The hall was very quiet when I finished, and in that quiet I heard the soft close of her ledger. One small sound, then nothing. I made myself keep my eyes on Aldrich. When the gathering broke and I finally let my gaze go to her section of the hall, she was gone. I went to bed that night and lay there until almost dawn, and my wolf was not alert anymore. My wolf was doing something I had no name for, a low, sustained note inside my chest, like a string pulled too tight and beginning to give way. I had the name for it, actually. I just refused to use it. She was gone from the hold by the following morning. Maren came to me at first light, her old face careful and composed in the way that meant she was controlling something large behind it. She told me that Sora had left before dawn, on foot, with her 2 bags and the empty birdcage. She had left a note for Maren, not for me, for Maren, thanking her for the months of work and wishing her good health. She had taken nothing that wasn't hers. I told Maren to let her go. I told myself the same thing. For 43 days, I told myself various forms of that same sentence, and for 43 days, my wolf ran a low thread of that impossible note through everything I did, through councils, through border meetings, through a dinner with Lysa of Karath that I ended early by claiming pack business. And the more plains to the east of the hold began to turn the wrong color. Not dramatically, you would not have noticed in the first week. But the grass at the moor's edge went pale where it had been green, and then pale turned brittle, and by the 6th week, a strip of land along the eastern reach that had always been the best grazing ground for the pack's common wolves was dry and gray and wrong in a way I could not explain to the rangers who reported it to me. I sent for Maren. She came and looked at me for a long time before she spoke. "You don't know what the Thornville gift is," she said. It was not a question. "A healing gift, a bloodline of healers." "Sit down, my lord." I sat. Maren was the only person in Ashenmoor who could say that to me and mean it as the instruction it was, and I had learned 30 years ago to obey her in this register. She sat across from me in the window alcove where she had sat across from my father when he was a boy, and she folded her hands, and she told me. The Thornville gift was not, she said, purely a talent for healing people. That was the part that survived in the stories, the part people remembered. The older part, the deeper part, the part that had been recognized by the first Varath Pack kings 300 years ago, was something more specific. The Thornville bloodline carried a bond with the land itself. A moon gift, the old word was. A life-threaded connection between a Thornville woman and the territory of the pack she was bonded to. When a Thornville woman was settled, thriving, in the right place and with the right mate, the land around her was nourished. Not magically, not dramatically, but at the root level, in the way that a forest is nourished by a particular quality of water that you cannot see but can measure in what grows. When she was displaced, when she was isolated, when she was separated from the place and the person she was meant for. The land dries, I said. Over time, yes. How long does the Thornville woman survive? In isolation. Maren looked at me steadily. They do not die of it in most cases, but the gift does. It fades out of the bloodline, and without the gift, she paused, there is very little left of the Thornville line. They have been dwindling for generations, my lord. Isolated family by family, pack by pack, everyone thinking they were unremarkable, everyone letting them go. Sora is very nearly the last. The note in my chest, that low sustained string, snapped. I was standing before I knew I had moved. Where would she go? I said. If she left on foot heading east, where would she stop? There is a settlement at the forest's edge, 3 days' walk. An old Thornville shelter. They kept them generations back when the gift was better understood. She would know of it. Maren's eyes were very calm. I told her about it when she came to us, in case she ever needed it. You knew she would leave. I knew you might let her. I had no answer for that. I deserved none. Kaelin, she had not used my name in 20 years. The Thornville gift cannot be forced into place. She must come back freely or not at all, and she must be bonded a true mate bond, settled and acknowledged. Anything less and the gift will not hold and the land will continue to die. She held my gaze. You know what that means. I knew. My wolf knew. It had known on the first night, when she came into the hall with her 2 bags and her empty birdcage and sat down at the lower table and laughed at something the youngest guard said, and every head turned, and I told myself it was curiosity. I called for my horse. I rode alone, partly because I was ashamed to bring witnesses to what I was riding toward, partly because what was between my wolf and the eastern reach of the greening forest was not a matter for the pack council or the border guard or anyone who would stand at my shoulder and catalog the expression on a king's face. The first day I rode hard and reached the moor's eastern edge by dark. The dead strip of land was wider than the rangers had reported, the grass gray and dry in a band that ran further south than the last survey, the earth beneath it pale and powdery in a way that made my wolf uneasy in the same way that a field after fire is uneasy. Not dangerous, just gone, just emptied of something it had always held. I made camp at the edge of the greening forest and slept poorly and woke to the smell of damp bark and old leaves and something else, something that pulled at the back of my wolf's awareness the way a half-remembered name pulls. I followed it. The second day was the forest itself, and I will not pretend I moved through it quickly or competently. The greening forest at its eastern reaches is old growth, not the managed timber stands of the hold's nearest border, but the kind of old that existed before packs drew territories, before any wolf built anything. The light came through in columns, amber and green, shifting. The undergrowth was dense enough that I dismounted and led the horse. My wolf was doing something it had never done before in my life. It was pulling, not in the direction of a threat, not the pull of a hunting instinct or the alert of an approaching pack. This was different, a direction-specific, constant, absolute pull, the way a lodestone pulls north regardless of how you turn it. It had been building since I crossed the moor, and in the forest it became the only instruction I had. I stopped reading the trail and started following the pull. I found her on the afternoon of the second day. The old shelter was smaller than I'd imagined, a stone foundation, walls that had been rebuilt once since the original, a roof of woven branches over timber beams. It sat in a clearing where a stream ran past it, shallow and clear over round stones, and a stand of orange-flowered plants, her plants, or their wild cousins, grew along the stream bank in a vivid strip that was the most color I had seen since leaving Ashenmoor. Sora was sitting outside on a low stone, her ledger in her lap, and she looked up when I came out of the tree line. She did not look surprised. She did not look afraid. She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has been carrying something very heavy and is now deciding whether to put it down. "My Lord Kaelin," she said. Not a warm greeting, not a cold one, level exactly her. I stopped at the edge of the clearing. I wanted to cross it at a run, and I made myself not. I said, "Sora, you rode alone." "Yes." "That was foolish." "Yes." She looked down at her ledger, then closed it in the same small sound I had heard her make in the great hall 43 days ago, and when she looked up again something in her face had shifted, not softened, exactly. Resolved. "Why are you here, my lord?" There were 100 answers I could have given her. The land, the Thornville gift, the dying moor. All of them were true and none of them were what she was asking, and she would know the difference because Sora always knew the difference. "Because I made a catastrophic mistake," I said, "and I'm hoping you will allow me to tell you what it cost me to see it." A pause, the stream ran. "Sit down, my lord," she said. "You look terrible." I sat on the stone beside her, and I told her everything. Not the political version, not the careful, measured account I would have given a council. I told her what my wolf had done the night she came to Ashenmoor. I told her what I had felt when I made the announcement and heard her ledger close. I told her what those 43 days had been, the note in my chest, the sleeplessness, the more going gray. I told her what Maren had told me about the Thornville gift, because she deserved to know. I understood now what her bloodline carried and what its loss would mean. I told her that none of those things were why I was here. The land can be told to someone else, I said. The gift and the moor and what Maren said, those matter, but they are not the reason I'm sitting in the greening forest at the edge of the world, having ridden alone for 2 days. I looked at her, and she looked back at me with those vivid, level eyes. I am here because I am a fool who took too long to say your name, and I would like the chance to not be that fool anymore, if you will give it to me. She was quiet for a long time. You announced a betrothal, she said. I released Lysa of Carath from any obligation 3 days after you left. Her pack agreed. The match had always been more my council's idea than anyone else's. I paused. Aldrich was displeased. Aldrich is frequently displeased. That is a fair characterization. Another silence. The orange flowers moved in a small wind off the stream. My wolf, which had been running that low, desperate pull for 2 days, was absolutely still now, the alertness from that very first night, held in motionless, careful readiness. Don't move. Don't rush this. She decides. Kaelin, she said my name without the title, and it did something to me I am not going to try to describe. I left because I have never in my life stayed somewhere I was not wanted. I'm not made for that. You were wanted, I was a coward. You were a king with a council and a border alliance and 40 years of pack politics. That is a kind way to say it. I'm not being kind, she said. I'm being precise. There's a difference. She looked at her hands in her lap. I knew what I was to your council. Nothing of strategic value. She said it without bitterness, as a fact. I have been called some form of that for most of my life. Too bright, too vivid, too disruptive, too much of the wrong things and not enough of the right ones. She looked up. I took up space in your hall and made noise and reorganized the herbs and grew flowers in a window where the cook didn't want them. I know what I am. You are my fated mate, I said. And I have known it since the first night, and I handled it with spectacular cowardice, and I am asking you to let me do better. Her breath went still. I kept my eyes on her face, because I had spent 43 days not looking at her, and I was done. And then something happened that I had not expected, and will never fully be able to account for. The mark came. Not slowly, not as a warning or a preamble or a gentle glow. One moment I was watching her face, and the next there was a heat on my left wrist, a heat that became a burn that became something past burning, deep and structural, the way old wood goes when it has caught fire at the core. I looked down. Silver, traced in silver on my wrist, fine as thread, a pattern I did not recognize at first and then did, not a symbol I had been taught, not a Vareth pack marking. Something older. Something that looked like roots, or the tracery of a river system seen from height, or the veins of a leaf held to light. I looked at Sora. Her left hand was pressed flat over her own wrist. Her face was very still. Sora. She lifted her hand. The same mark. Silver on her wrist, fine and exact. The twin of mine, the roots, the rivers, the leaf's veins, burning softly there in the forest light like something that had been waiting a very long time to be visible. We both looked at them for a moment in the kind of silence that is not empty, but full of something that has no sound. Oh, she said softly. Not profound, not ceremonial, just, oh, as though she had been wondering about something for a very long time and had just been given the answer. I know what this is, she said. Maren told me about the Thornville bond. I didn't think, she stopped. I didn't think I would carry it. The last Thornville women to carry the true bond were 3 generations back. I thought it had faded. It has not faded, I said. No, she was still looking at the mark on her wrist. No, it hasn't. I reached across slowly, I want you to understand how slowly, and covered her marked wrist with my hand. Not to hold her in place, not to claim, to be there, to be the thing that stayed. I am going to ask you something, I said, and whatever you answer I will respect it, and I will not follow you if you say no, and I will find another way to address the moor and the land and all the rest of it. This is not a condition. I held her gaze. Come home with me. Come back to Ashenmoor. Not as Marin's assistant, not as a strategic match, not as anything my council decides to call you. As my mate, my Luna. The person who grows orange flowers in whatever window she pleases and reorganizes whatever she pleases, and is too bright and too vivid and too much and not enough of the right things by Aldrich's measure, and is entirely the right person by mine. Sara looked at me for a long time. The mark on both our wrists was warm in the amber light. Your counsel is going to be difficult, she said. My counsel is always difficult. I find I am less interested in that than I used to be. And the moor? The moor is a separate matter. I came here for you, not the moor. I want that to be unambiguous. Another silence. The stream, the orange flowers, my wolf in its absolute stillness waiting. All right, she said. We rode back over 3 days, and I will tell you what those 3 days were like. They were the first 3 easy days I had spent in 6 months. Not easy in the sense that nothing was said, everything was said. We talked from the moment we mounted until the light went, and then by the small fire in camp we talked some more, and I understood for the first time that what I had been avoiding in the hall at Ashenmoor, what I had been calling disruption, calling too much, calling inconvenient, was simply her, which is to say the most fully alive person I had ever encountered, who had been moving through the world at full brightness in a series of gray places that called her an eyesore and let her go. She told me about the settlement she had grown up in, a small Thornville community 2 packs east once and then smaller and then mostly gone. She had watched it go. Her mother, her grandmother's sisters. One by one, the women of the line had been let go by the places that held them, not violently, not cruelly, just let go, the way you let go of something you've decided isn't worth the effort of keeping. And each one, isolated, had dimmed a little, and the land around each one had dried a little, and the gift had thinned. It happens very quietly, she said. That's the worst part of it. No one notices until there's almost nothing left. I thought about 43 days. I thought about how quietly the moor had gone gray. I noticed, I said. Too late, and I noticed. Not too late, she said. She was looking at her wrist where the mark glowed softly in the firelight. Almost too late is different. We came back to Ashenmoor Hold on the afternoon of the 3rd day, and I did not bring her in through a side entrance or arrange a quiet introduction, or give Aldrich any warning. I rode into the main courtyard with Sara beside me, and I dismounted, and I helped her down. She rolled her eyes at this, because she was entirely capable of dismounting herself, and I knew it, but she allowed it, and I walked with her through the Hold's great doors and into the hall where my council sat at their long table in their afternoon session, and I put her marked wrist and mine on the table side by side. Not a gesture of proof, not a performance. Just the truth visible. The hall was very quiet. Aldrich looked at the marks for a long time. He was not a cruel man, Aldrich. I want to be honest about this. He was a careful one, a political one, a man who loved the pack in the way that counted costs and weighed alliances and called things like Sara nothing of strategic value, because he genuinely did not know another way to measure worth. He looked at those marks, and then he looked at Sara, at her amber dress and the fine threaded silver at her wrist and the absolutely level expression on her face, and I watched something shift in him. Not shame exactly, recognition. The Thornville bond, he said quietly. Yes. He was quiet another moment. Then he stood. It was not a sweeping gesture. It was a careful, deliberate, old man rising from his seat, the way a man stands when he understands that a thing is larger than the measure he was using. The rest of the table stood. Sora looked at me, not with triumph, she was not built for triumph, was not interested in it. Just with that level, precise look that meant she was taking something in and filing it in the ledger of the world as she found it. "Well," she said quietly, "that's unexpected." "You deserve more than unexpected," I said, "but it's a start. There is more to tell, but I will give you the shape of it rather than every hour." The council accepted the bond, not without questions, not without the kind of careful political deliberation that Aldrich brought to everything, which I was, at that point, grateful for rather than impatient with. They were thorough. They asked about the land implications, about the Thornville succession, about what the bond would mean for the Kareth alliance we had set aside. Sora answered most of it herself, calmly and without flourish, with the same precision she brought to herb classification and pack health records, and I watched Aldrich's expression move, degree by degree, from careful political tolerance to something closer to actual respect. The Eastern Moor, I should tell you about the Moor. It did not heal overnight. I want to be truthful about this, because the stories people tell about moon gifts tend toward the dramatic and the sudden, and what actually happened was slower and more like the restoration of something that had always been there, dormant and waiting. In the first week after Sora came back to Ashenmoor, the Rangers reported that the gray strip at the moor's edge was not spreading further. In the second week, they reported that the soil at the strip's southern edge had changed quality, looser, darker. By the fourth week, the first green came back. Not dramatic, just green in a place that had been gray. The kind of thing you had to know to look for. She went out to the moor herself on the morning she first saw the green. I went with her, because I went most places with her now. Not in the way that a guard accompanies a charge, but in the way that I was done letting her go places without me simply because the world had never built the habit of keeping her. She crouched at the moor's edge and put her bare palm on the new grass and was quiet for a moment. "It remembers," she said. "What does?" "The land, what was here before, it remembers and it comes back." She looked up at me. "That's what Marin never quite explained. It's not that the Thornville gift creates something new. It's that it lets what was already there come back." I crouched beside her. The grass was very green under her hand. "That seems like a better gift," I said. "It is," she said simply. We were bonded formally at Ashenmoor Hold on a clear morning in the third month after I brought her home, and I will not tell you the ceremony was anything like my council's original plans for a Luna's bonding, which had involved, as best I could remember, a great deal of ceremonial complexity and the appropriate display of alliance value. What it actually involved was Marin, who wept throughout and denied it, the pack wolves, 3 of the older ones having wandered in from the courtyard and sat down in the hall without invitation, as though they had every right to witness this. The full council, standing, including Aldrich, who was dry-eyed and correct, and gave me a look at the ceremony's end that I chose to interpret as approval. Sora in a dress that was, by her own choice, amber, vivid, entirely herself, not a shade dimmed, and the mate mark on both our wrists, which had been there since the greening forest and had never once suggested it would be anywhere else. I said the words that kings say. She said the words that Lunas say, and then added several words that Lunas, as best I know, do not traditionally say, involving the administration of the healing stores, her plans for the Eastern Moor restoration, and a pointed note to Aldrich about the clay pot on the eastern windowsill of the healing quarters being moved back from the western window, where someone had relocated it in her absence, to the eastern window where it got the correct light. Aldrich said he would see to it. She said thank you. The 3 old pack wolves, who had been sitting very still throughout, got up at that point and walked back out to the courtyard in single file, apparently satisfied. I have thought about that moment many times since. Here is what I can tell you now, at the distance of a year. The moor is green. Not all of it. Restoration is a slow work, and Sara is meticulous about slow work, about doing things in the right order and not rushing the parts that need time. But the green has spread further than the rangers expected by this point, and there are 3 new grazing grounds along the eastern reach that the pack's common wolves are using, and Maren has declared that the medicinal herb beds along the moor's edge are producing better than they have in living memory. Sara reorganized the healing stores twice more after coming back, and has now reorganized Maren's record system in a way that Maren initially resisted and now refers to as obvious. The clay pot is on the eastern windowsill. The orange flowers are extremely vivid. Aldrich, at our last council meeting, referred to her as the Luna's particular expertise when discussing the moor restoration project, which is, for Aldrich, extremely warm. She laughed when I told her, not a loud laugh, a small, genuine one, the kind she saves for things that actually strike her as funny rather than politely so. Tell him I said the council has its own particular expertise, she said, in not knowing what a thing is worth until someone else shows them. That is pointed. I am precise, she said. There's a difference. I will end where it matters. There is a thing I do now that I did not do before. I notice. Sara told me once in the greening forest at the fire on the second night of the ride home that the Thornville women had been lost over generations not because any one person made a cruel choice, but because of accumulated small ones. No one quite noticing. No one quite finding it worth the effort of keeping. Each woman let go a little more easily than the last, the gift thinning with each generation, the land quietly graying at the edges, no single moment of harm, just the accumulated weight of not seeing. I think about that. I think about how close I came to being another quiet loss in that chain. How I stood in my own hall and watched the most fully alive person I had ever met walk out through my doors, and I held my wolf down and called it politics and let her go. Almost too late, not too late. There are things I do now that a king who had not ridden alone into the greening forest at the edge of the world would not do. I notice when Sara has gone 2 days without going outside and I say, "Come to the moor with me." I notice when a council meeting runs long into the afternoon and she has been sitting in the anteroom, waiting, and I end the meeting. I notice the orange flowers every morning in the window where they belong. Small things, specific things, the kind that cannot be stamped or repeated or made general because they belong to her and she is not general. She is entirely, irreplaceably herself. Last night she fell asleep in the window alcove with her ledger in her lap, and the mark on her wrist catching the last of the evening light, and the old pack wolf that has taken to sleeping outside our chamber door came in and put its head on her feet, and I sat across from her for a while, and did not move and did not speak. My wolf was in its absolute stillness. Not waiting anymore, arrived. I had let her walk away once. I will not make a practice of mistakes.